Good morning, everybody. Looks like we have a few participants still joining here, so we'll just give it a couple seconds here before we get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for today's QI Power Hour. Our CEO, Tracy Sharon, usually hosts these sessions, but unfortunately, you're stuck with me today. For those who don't know me, my name is Colin McCaddy, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at the Health Quality Council. If this is your first QI Power Hour, this series is the Health Quality Council's free monthly webinar learning series, where we bring together improvers from a variety of sectors who share an interest in improving health and healthcare. I'm joining you today from our office in Saskatoon on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. At the Health Quality Council, we serve all peoples in Saskatchewan, which also includes traditional lands that are parts of Treaties 2, 4, 5, 8, and 10. As an organization, we strive to respectfully create and maintain strong bonds and partnerships with Indigenous nations and reaffirm our commitment to reconciliation and collaboration. All of our QI Power Hour sessions are recorded and posted to our website at saskhealthquality.ca, where you can watch any of our past sessions or watch this session again if you really loved it, and it'll be posted later on this afternoon. And while you're on our website, please sign up for our QI Power Hour newsletter so you can receive notifications on any upcoming sessions and details on how to register for those sessions. We're absolutely thrilled with the growth that we've seen of the QI Power Hour, not only throughout our own province of Saskatchewan, but also across Canada and around the world. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today so we can learn and improve together. As always, your engagement and participation is welcomed for today's webinar. So using the chat functions, please feel free to share questions, comments, and ideas. If you're not sure how to do that, there's a little chat bubble in the bottom right-hand corner. So you can click on that and be sure it says that you're sending the message to everyone so that we can all see it and all kind of gain insights from whatever you have to share. We'll have time at the end for some of the questions and answers, which I'll monitor throughout the presentation and ask Dave based on what I see in the chat. So without any further ado, I'm happy to welcome one of my HQC colleagues to present for you all about leading change and change development. Dave Broda is the Learning Programs Manager here at HQC, and he joined us with 10 years of experience at the SHA and 8 years of experience with the Ministry of Corrections, Public Safety, and Policing. Dave holds a master's degree in social work and is a certified mediator, coach, and coach trainer. He holds a certificate in leadership from Leadership Saskatoon, and he's been teaching and coaching others in the areas of leadership since 2016. His interest areas include leadership praxis, relationship management, and change leadership. And also, a fun fact about Dave, he may be the most hydrated person on earth. He averages about 4 liters of water per day. So please forgive him if you see him, if he needs to take a quick sip to quench his thirst during today's session. And with that, yeah, and there's this giant water bottle. He carries that around everywhere he goes, and it's amazing. So welcome, Dave. I'm going to turn it over to Dave now, and thank you all again.
Great. Thanks, Colin. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. Like Colin said, I'm relatively new to the HQC, the Health Quality Council team here. And my journey as far as change started probably back in 2016 or so. And we'll talk a bit more later this morning about it. But what really sort of got me hooked on change leadership and change management was one of William Bridges' books that I was exposed to, and the Bridges model. But I'll circle back to that. Since that time, since about 2016, I've been investing quite a bit of time into change leadership, learning about change, but also trying to understand how I can actually demonstrate competent change leadership strategies, given my own background, my own experience, and really sort of got me thinking and reading a lot about us personally as human beings, as individual leaders, and how that can help us and hinder us as we work through change. So this quote here I put as a first slide is not meant to challenge you, not meant to threaten, although it is a bit of an abrupt quote. But sometimes, uh, leaders wonder, have I been involved in this? Have I had a place in change leadership? I've only been leading for a couple of years or 6 months, whatever the case might be. I don't really think that I'm a change leader. But this quote here, if you're not leading change, you're not leading anything, you're just managing the status quo. Campbell McPherson, in my mind, as he wrote and spoke, talked to me more about that we are all actually leading change all the time. And I do believe that this is accurate. All of you have bosses. You all are involved in teams. You all have service provision lines where you are responsible to patients and families and residents. Change comes from a variety of places, and all of you will have been the initiator of some changes, but also the recipient of changes. My colleagues right now are likely considering some changes they are wanting to make. And my boss might have some changes that she's working on that I might not know of yet. So I'd just like you to sort of consider this morning the change projects that you have been involved in. When have you led change? And thinking in the back of your minds about, has it gone well? When has it not gone well? So today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. We're going to be talking about our approach to leadership. Like I was saying, how my approach helps me as I'm leading change, or how it might hinder me. We're going to be talking about teams, about leading teams, the power of teams, because teams can get in the way of change. And sometimes leaders approach change and discover that their team or team members are some of the first barriers that they come across. And then finally, we're going to talk about some models this morning. I'm hoping to quickly provide an overview of models, so that those of you who haven't been exposed to change much have an idea about some of the theories and some of the models, some of the seminal authors, and finally about some commonalities. So we're going to be talking about some common themes that these models share, so that if you're going to take some things away and adapt, these are some things that all of the authors seem to be talking about. Just some disclaimers this morning. I will be providing a quick overview on a lot of things. So every slide I'll be going through pretty quickly. And every slide, came from a methodology, came from a book or a series of books. So if you see something in here that you know about, and I'm spending a very short period of time, that is why. We're going to be covering a lot of material, but at the end of the session, actually, I think it's up there now on our website, there's a complete source list. So every author that I reference, if there are any videos, any tools, the models themselves, self and team assessments, all are in the source list at the end. So if you want to learn more, that will be available to you. So I was hoping to start with a quote by Ron Carucci, who wrote this article, How Leaders Get in the Way of Organizational Change. And he says leaders frequently underestimate the amount of work required for the change, overestimate the organization's capacity to make the change, and misjudge how the organization views their connection to the change. So there are a lot of variables when it comes to leading change. There are a lot of missteps. There are leaders, on every floor in every business, corporation, and organization building here in Saskatoon, small towns around the world. We are all over the place, we being leaders. And often I think leaders are approaching change with what is on their person, meaning what they have in their back pocket, their experience, their knowledge, and they're walking into meeting rooms and filling out project management forms based on what they have. So this morning is meant to provide information, ultimately to provide a choose your own adventure. So uh, if you are coming and you don't really know exactly what change management is, um, you don't know what change leadership is, and you're sort of hearing these buzzwords and you're trying to make sense of them, or you are coming as an advanced, skilled leader who's implemented some operational or transformational change strategies. I'm hoping to provide some information to supplement what you've got, some sources, so you can dig a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more. Ultimately, my hope is that some of you will return to your desks afterwards and decide, I think I might need a little bit of work on this. I'm going to learn a bit more about this. I'm curious about this approach. This is quite interesting, and evolve and adapt. Ideally, as leaders, we will be adapting and evolving and changing and improving ourselves all the time to serve our teams better, ourselves better, and ultimately our patients, residents, families, clients, depending on where you're coming from, better. Also, before I really get started, I would just like you to think about your own bias. Why are you drawn to specific things? If you do have a change model that you have adapted and adopted for your own purposes in your own department or organization, what is it about that model that you were drawn to? Why did you choose that? Was it simply exposure to a first model and some training, and that's been it? Or has there been something else? For me personally, I tend to be more of a democratic and affiliative leader. So I tend to be drawn to models that are more people focused, models that provide team members a say, participation, a voice. And I know some areas that I need to work on are around vision and strategy. So when I personally come across a model where there's a lot on vision or strategy, I personally cringe a little bit because it's something I need to develop yet. And I'm drawn more to my comfort zones. So just keep that in mind as we're talking today. Are you engaging in a certain idea or model because that is where your comfort lies, or another reason? And if you can stretch yourself, how might you stretch yourself to build on areas that you might be challenged in? So this is the first part of our goals about my approach. So I paint everything blue. This is the Dave-isms. Um, every meeting I go to, every interaction I have has a Dave touch to it. Everything I fill out, my projects, meetings that I am leading, people will come to expect a certain approach from me, and we all have it. Somebody has done your job. For all of you on the call, somebody else did your job before you arrived, and they did that job a certain way. They engaged stakeholders a certain way. They arranged their budget a certain way. They reported a certain way. And all of those ways were partly connected to their personal approach. And then you started and you took over the job, and you likely didn't do the job the same way they did. So what is it about us, that makes us approach our jobs in a certain way? Um, so we're going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about this before we move on to the next pieces. So I just wrote a short list here of some of the contributions to our personal approaches. This isn't an expansive list. I'm not going to talk uh, uh, about all of the things that affect and impact human behavior clearly, because it's very complicated. But I do want to touch on some of the things that affect how we're showing up to the boardrooms and meetings, all of our actions and behaviors. Because whether I like it or not, as I show up to work every day, I am uh, impacting everybody around me with my tone, my word choice, my language, my inaction, the greetings and everything else. So this is a little bit about what makes us tick, what's important to us, how others find us in situations. And if I'm engaged in a hard conversation later on today, how might I show up for that hard conversation? These things do not need to be a mystery to us. There are ways of learning about ourselves. We can take a deep dive into ourselves and learn a little bit more about what makes us tick. So I'm just going to cover some of these before we actually get into some change models. So values, this is a quote right from the Baird Values Assessment, and this is in the source list. But values are about who you are, what you hold dear, what upsets you, what underlines your decisions. I'll let you read the rest of the quote here. But if I, as a leader, value autonomy and independence, then I'm likely to show up a certain way. If I'm more likely to value acceptance and diversity, then you will see that in how I'm approaching, my leadership skills, my leadership duties and tasks. And if I value punctuality, time management, efficiency, then you will start to see that showing up as well. So a value self-assessment is available along with some of these other self-assessments. So this one is around emotional intelligence. This may be new for some and not new for others. Primal Leadership was a book that was written by an author named Daniel Goleman. He spoke a lot about emotional intelligence. And then some other authors, Travis Bradberry and something Greaves, wrote a couple of follow-up books, The Emotional Intelligence Workbook, and one of my favorite books of all time, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And this is their model. And I'll just sort of really quickly run through how this emotional intelligence model works. And I think you'll be able to see the link about, how this might affect how we're leading change. So the first part about the personal row and what I see, self-awareness. So I'm in a meeting with a couple of team members, and we are talking about the first steps of a change initiative. And one of my team members is on his phone. So I see that and I'm pissed off. I'm a bit agitated that he's sitting in an important meeting and he's on his phone, and I'm making some assumptions about why he is. The next box over, self-management, what do I do about it? In the moment I decide to speak more loudly, sort of have a bit more of an assertive body language, and I'm trying to sort of get his attention. The social awareness is my picking up on his body language and what's going on for him. So I notice that he puts his phone down and crosses his arms, looks at me, and then sort of looks at the table. And then the final box is the relationship management. So that is, what am I doing with all of these other three pieces? How am I actually taking care of that relationship? And in that moment, in my example, maybe I decide that I'm too agitated to really pay him much more attention. So I decide to ignore him for the remainder of the meeting. So that's sort of a really quick overview and example about how quickly our emotional intelligence can work. Do I know that I'm pissed off? Do I recognize that I'm speaking louder? Am I picking up that he's crossed his arms and is body language wise disengaging? And do I realize fully how I'm managing that relationship? So since about 1962, people have been really interested in personality or temperament assessments. So you might recognize some of these on the screen. Um, I tried to just list a few of the really popular ones. But personality assessments, um, there's a lot of discussion about them, and this one doesn't fit, this one's not accurate. I don't really buy into these. Like a lot of other things with self-reflection, um, th- you know, they are meant to provide us with something to think about. So if you have done a self-assessment, when is the last time you've read through it? If you've never done one, would you consider doing one? And for those of you who've really read through any sort of self-assessments from the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or DISC, what did you do with it? How did you find it? But more importantly, what did you think of the strengths in yourself that that assessment may have identified? If it spoke about challenges or deficits, what did you think about those? Ideally, we would be challenging ourselves, sort of finding a flashlight to illuminate any dark corners of the room inside of ourselves to see, do I actually do this? Is this actually part of me? Um, or is it not? And how am I, acting and behaving? What is my personality and temperament like? Leadership styles is another thing that contributes to our personal approach. So our leadership style, this is something, again, that was written by Daniel Goleman. So he proposed that we all have these natural leadership styles that we tend to revert back to when we are stressed, if we are in a hurry, and he, identified these 6 primary leadership styles. So the point here isn't necessarily about putting you in a small box, again, like the temperament testing or other things. Ideally, leaders will be able to pivot through these different leadership styles and recognize, this is a spot in a change management effort that I think I might need to use some coaching. This is a spot where I might need to be a bit of a pace setter and choose a gear and then operate in 3rd gear for this period of time to get my team to catch up. And at this point, this particular change effort is actually posing a risk to patients. So temporarily, I need to step into a very directive position and to direct staff and remove democracy and relationships because there is a risk here to some patients. Scott Ginsburg wrote a book some time ago. I don't know if it's a very, very popular book, but I really enjoyed it. It's called The Approachable Leader. There's a picture of it here. And what I liked about his book is he spoke about a communication experience. Some of you on the call I likely met because I worked in SHA for 10 years, and I know that there are some joiners from there. I saw some familiar names pop up, and many of you I haven't met. The reality is this morning, as I'm talking, you are all you are all having an experience with me. You are finding me, boring and monotonous. You are sort of starting to disengage because something is not, sitting well with you about how I'm presenting. You are becoming interested. My approach, how I communicate, my style, is affecting everybody. And this book basically is a series of questions. And some of these questions up on the screen are questions directly from the book. So there's sort of a question and then a chapter and a question and a chapter. And it is meant to get us thinking about, for leaving, say, a change management meeting. And well, we've left, we've done some project management, we've gone through some forums, we've identified some milestones and where we are in relation to those milestones. As we're walking out, how are our teams, how do they experience that meeting? How do people experience us? And if 7 people in my organization are identified for a change management project that I'll be leading, what will their initial reactions be? Will they feel like I'll be easy to work with or difficult? Will they fear or not look forward to my questions about their weekend because they just want to get down to business? What will they think about me leading these change meetings? Some of you may have seen this before. This is the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument. So it was created by Thomas and Kilmann. You'll see assertiveness on one axis, cooperative on the other axis. And Thomas and Kilmann spoke about how we all have, again, some natural ways of dealing with conflict. If we are moving up the assertiveness axis and our cooperativeness is low, then we may be competitors where we may argue our point and try to win. And if we're more the opposite, where we're not really that assertive, and we decide relationships are far more important, and we're okay with whatever way we go in the meeting, then we may accommodate and say, no, that's fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. I'm okay. Let's just keep our team strong and keep working cohesively. And ideally, we would all be moving up toward the top right, which is the collaborating square. And this is really about being able to be assertive, talking about your points, arguing when necessary, but also taking care of relationships with whoever you're meeting with. So after all of that, part one about our personal approach and how it impacts change leadership, this is an example. This is a real example of who I am and how some of these things affect me. So I value work-life balance, honest communication, and relationships. I've got a fairly good self and social awareness, but my focus on relationships can eat away at meeting and project time. I can procrastinate because I see deadlines as negotiable. Because I'm an affiliative leader, my team members are likely to feel heard, but they may not get direction from me quickly. And when conflict arises, I know that I can be collaborative, but I can also be competitive. This is a very, very quick and rough example of how all of those pieces we just spoke about for the first part of the morning here could affect me as I come into work. Ultimately, why are we talking about this? Because our interaction with human beings is going to have an impact on how our change initiatives are successful. Are we succeeding at them? The human part of change leadership is a huge part, and this whole first part was around the human side. And as a change leader, if I've got deficits along all of these, how will it affect the teams and how will it affect the project? I've got a picture of horses up here. Basically, this is just to highlight that sometimes, inattention to our the people side of leading change, if that part is not developed, our periphery vision is underdeveloped, it's blurry, it hasn't really been exercised. We are focused on the goals. We've got our budget, we've got our milestones, we've got the end goal or outcome in mind, but we are not picking up on all of these pieces around us, then sometimes it can be frustrating for everybody involved. And sometimes leaders who aren't paying attention to their own impact on change question why. Why is this happening? Why is there so much drama? Why aren't they getting on board? Why is it that they're disengaging in meetings? Why is this person not saying good morning to me in the morning? So if you think of the complexity of change as a golf course here, here's an analogy. If we haven't developed this reflection side of our personal approach, then we simply don't have all the clubs in our golf bag. So we can still get through the course, but we may not have the right clubs to get around an obstacle or to land properly. And in the end, again, we may finish. It just might not be the optimal game. So this morning we're talking about just an overview of some things that if we work on all of these things simultaneously or take turns rotating some work on them, how we can make our game with the complexity of leading change more optimal. So we're going to talk a little bit about teams next and how change tends to affect teams and team members. Greg Pauly, thanks for your comment. It just popped up on my screen. We're all just getting bad at golf. So ideally teams, sometimes as leaders, we just want them to be gung-ho. We want them to get on board quickly. We want them to comply. We want them to be pleased and happy while they're getting on board with our change project. So this is what it'd be nice. It'd be nice if we had this, but that is not the reality. Change can hit people pretty hard, and we're going to talk a little bit about the theories as to why. So we're going to talk about some individual change impacts, and then some team functioning, team dynamics in a little bit here. So some of you might recognize this. This is the Kubler-Ross grief and loss cycle, grief and loss stages. But this has also been adapted to an emotional response to change. So a lot of people refer to this as the change curve. Really, ultimately it's meant to teach us as leaders that if we are approaching our teams with an upcoming change, that we should expect some emotional response. That we shouldn't expect everybody to just be happy and get on board, that there may be some shock off the bat, there may be some denial or disbelief, or people might talk with each other about, I don't actually think this is going to happen. This is probably just another flavor of the week. Next week we'll be back to the same old. And then frustration tends to follow. So this is about predictability. Just predicting that our team members will experience an emotional response when we talk to them about change. Now, what do we do with this? And can we have a uniform approach to everybody expecting some of this? This next slide here is from David Rock, and this is from the Neuro Leadership Institute in New York. So David Rock is a neuro leadership expert, and his institute proposed that people's brains respond to change, and our bodies respond to change similarly to how our bodies respond to pain in other ways. Social needs are treated in the same way that the brain treats the need for food and water. So even though I might be sharing an office with a colleague and our boss comes in and tells us that there's a big change happening, and she's moving us down to the bottom floor. We're going to be moving into some cubicles where we can focus on this change. Even though my colleague and I might be frustrated to an equal level, we may not be frustrated about the same things. I'm a relatedness person, so I might be frustrated out of fear of losing my office mate, the relationship that I built, the morning coffee with a muffin. And my office mate might be more concerned about fairness. And she might say, this isn't fair. I've been here a long time. My tenure with this organization should mean that I remain in this office. Somebody else should be put on this. Somebody else should go to a cubicle. So this is meant to be another tool for us leaders to work with our staff, understand that their emotion, is present, but also if we're getting to know our staff, they're all motivated by different things. So what may motivate them? And once we find out what motivates them, then we can start to reward those things. So I'm not going into the weeds a whole lot this morning. I'm not going into specific project management tools, which I told you, but I'm just going to dip into the weeds a little bit by talking about building a team. Sometimes we are able to build a team. A lot of times we are given a team, we have an existing team, we get a portion of a team to say, okay, this is your new goal. You need to, change this. We're eliminating this program. We're going to get this program off its feet, use, this specific team to do that. But sometimes they say, choose your team. And then you can embark on this change journey. So just a little bit about what kind of team members we're looking for. We're looking for passionate volunteers. Ideally, we would have some champions, some influencers. We definitely need some content experts. So as we're looking at change efforts, ideally we would have people who know the business well on our team. Ideally, we'd have some project management skills on the team, or maybe you're deciding to use this as a coaching strategy and you're wanting to develop some succession planning with a particular member and getting their skills stronger in project management. And then, of course, patients, families, residents, clients. Do they have a place on the team? Can we involve them in our team? So a little bit more about team formation. If you have seen this, I mean, you'll recognize it very quickly. If you haven't, Tuckman had a model here of the stages of team development. Basically, he proposed, when teams are forming, sometimes we have niceties, we are polite, we are civil, and there's, we sort of lean back a little bit and don't invest everything as far as our opinions. And as the team moves on, we start to storm, we start to argue, we start to butt heads. We haven't sorted out all of the roles and responsibilities. Informal, leaders sort of rise up in the teams, and it sort of storms until we sort of identify some norms, and teams start to adjust, and they start to learn about each other, and they start to form trust. And after that, they can actually start performing, and it becomes a bit less dramatic, and the efficiency improves. This here is by an author named Patrick Lencioni. Patrick Lencioni wrote a couple of books, The Advantage. He wrote The Ideal Team Player, and probably his biggest book is his 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And this is a model of his where he talks about, this is similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he talks about trust being the most important thing on a team. That, if you look on the left column, if high-performing teams have trust, they ask each other for help. They share weaknesses and help each other. They believe everyone is trying their best. And in a dysfunctional team, they might hide their mistakes, they might make assumptions, they might hold grudges, you might see evidence of psychological warfare. Once we have this trust, Lencioni argues that then people can start to argue, constructive debate, proper conflict that is meant to push teams forward, but that we need the trust first. So this again is a tool for us leaders to look at our teams as we're leading change. How are our teams doing? Do we think that there is some trust there? And I'm going to come back a little bit later to talking about investing in trust. So this is a bit of a measuring stick to help us to evaluate our teams, maybe even to talk with them about it. Okay, so those are the first 2 parts. I know I'm going quite fast, but let's get into some actual models here and talk about the actual models and the difference between change management and change leadership. So quite a while ago, and the article is in the source list, John Kotter, who is one of the big authors on change leadership and change management, put out an article, and he talked about the difference between the two. So what exactly is change management? What is change leadership? Change management refers to a set of basic tools or structures intended to keep any change effort under control. Change leadership is an engine. It's about creating urgency, vision, and empowerment. It's about the people who want to make something happen. So simply put, we manage processes and we lead people. So there is a place for change management and change leadership. They are not synonymous, but there are times when we want to push change leadership forward and lead people. There's a time when people need a vision. They need an explanation as to why. They need a burning platform. And there's a time when we need to have visual management up on the boards, when milestones need to be identified on a chart where people can see, and we need to manage the change as it's taking place. So we're going to get into a few of the models. This is John Kotter's 8-Step for Leading Change. I underlined Leading Change because that is the name of the book where this model came from. You may not be able to read the words here, but you can download the slide deck later maybe you can read it a bit better there. It's a bit blurry for me. But he talks about urgency, about a burning platform, sort of creating some urgency for our team members, and then building a coalition, people who have power, have knowledge, have credibility. And he warned us leaders to try to avoid bringing team members on who had an ego that might get in the way of a cohesive team. He talked about vision and a defined and strategic vision. Um, he speaks about a volunteer army. He says enlist a volunteer army. And some of his later work, he talked about a quote being 10% of the organization being part of this volunteer army, which may not apply to everybody. But he also talks about generating acceptance among team members. So building this strong team. He speaks about enabling action, changing parts of the system that do not actually support the change. He speaks about the short-term wins, basically showing a proof of effectiveness of the change, sustaining some acceleration, so continuing to push and learning from what you've done so far, and then instituting the change at the end. And ideally, anchoring that change in the organizational culture, which he speaks about. So this is one model. John Cotter is his name. This is William Bridges and Susan Bridges' transition model. This is the model that I was first exposed to when it came to change leadership and change management. So the 6 steps are up on the far left that I'll let you all read through. The piece of this model that I grasped onto as a consultant at that time, I didn't really know a whole lot about change leadership and change management, just being exposed to it. What I liked is that William Bridges had a 4P sort of cheat sheet where he talked about how people need a purpose for the change. They need a picture of the future. They need the plan. How are we going to get there? And people need to be able to play a part. They need to see themselves as having a role in the change. Those 4 Ps, as somebody who's very busy, working in the health authority, as a consultant, it gave me something to grasp onto, a very easy model. 4 Ps, something I could remember and refer back to, and it grew from there. This is an older model. Some of you may recognize this. This is from McKinsey & Company. It's called the 7S framework. And even though it's an older model, it's from the late 70s, one of the ways that this model was important is it started to highlight these bottom 3 circles that are pink, which McKinsey & Company referred to as the soft S's. And really, McKinsey & Company started to shift the conversation between the structural pieces meaning the hierarchy, the decision-making, the roles and responsibility, moving it over to the coordination, relationship pieces, and proposing that you can have a high-functioning team over here that's propelling the work and moving things forward fast. But if there's another team over here and the pieces are connected and this team is falling behind and there's a lot of conflict and things aren't working well and there's a lot of turnover, then it is going to affect the overall change effort. Anyways, that's an older model that is still being used today. This is a more recent model that I was exposed to. This is the last book that I read just in the last couple of weeks about change leadership and change management. Thanks to the Saskatchewan Medical Association for introducing me to this model. So this model, the steps are up here on the screen. It's a sort of a circular picture, I guess, where you hear the wake-up call and there's some preparation, creating some vision, some organizational vision and commitment. I'll let you read through the steps here, but some of the things that I liked about Anderson and Ackerman's model is that they spoke a lot about self and organizational assessment. So they talked a lot about organizational commitment, capacity. Is the organization ready? So before we start making changes, let's do some assessments to see if we're actually prepared to follow through on this. They also spoke about a co-creative style, and they identify some issues with the command and control leadership approach or directive leadership. And another thing that I really liked about this model is it is for those of you who like to have checklists, like to have sort of step-by-step, this is what I do next. In this case, I'm a sponsor. In this case, I'm a program manager. In this case, I am a, on the front line, working with patients. Anderson and Ackerman separate the different parts of the change project and the different roles. And as you're working through this circle, they talk to you about, okay, these are your activities during this part. This is what you should be expecting for the next part. These are your responsibilities. I thought that was really strong. And if you want to look more into their model, you can look up Being First. Just Google Being First, Ackerman, Anderson, and you'll come across more information about their model. ADKAR is another model that was from Prosky, and this model. Well, I'm looking at the time here. I'm going to try to wrap up a little bit more quickly in the next few minutes here, but they split it up into awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. Some people have talked about the cons of this model being not really easily transferable to larger transformational change. Sometimes other authors have spoken about this model being a bit more helpful for the team and the person and not for larger initiatives. But if you're interested in this model, I would encourage you to read a little bit more. This is Charles Lewin's change management model. This is split into 3 phases of unfreezing the old, making the change, and then refreezing in the new. Some people like this model because it's based on behavioral psychology. So there's an emphasis on the people. So he talks a lot about the people. Others find that it oversimplifies change management and change leadership, and specifically that this refreeze stage is not really very useful, because often we need to learn and adapt and change and go back to the middle. So some people have found this to be a bit oversimplified, but this is yet another model. And here are some honorable mentions. So if you are really attached to one of these models and are on the call this morning, I am sorry that they didn't get more attention this morning. But I just wanted to highlight first that there are many more models that we're not talking about. And second, there are some models that are maybe specific to certain businesses. So depending on where you're joining us from, the top point here, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, their psychology of change framework, for those of us working in healthcare, they've got a lot of great work on intrinsic motivation. So depending on where you're joining us, you might find other models useful and beneficial for you. So I'm going to bring all of this home with some common themes. What have all these authors talked about? What are some things that they all put some attention into, all put some effort into? When I was reading, the books and the articles and watching, videos and reading thematic analyses of these change management models, I start to see, themes as well and similarities, and start to hear authors speak about the same things. So I put these into 8 categories. 1, assessing your readiness for change, your approach and your organization's readiness and commitment for the change. So this is the assessment piece. For you, your team and your organization. Is your organization ready to commit some resources and attention, culture shifts to this specific change? Number 2, expect emotion and resistance. Listen to your team members' difficulties and frustrations, validate them and respond to them. So we should all be expecting this. Change leadership authors all speak about, let's expect some difficulty here. Communicate with your teams about why the change is needed, what the purpose is. Anchor it to something outside of your authority, something bigger, something important in the world, a shared value. Create some urgency, establish a burning platform and a public narrative. So Why me? Why us? Why now? Number four is painting a picture of the defined vision. So what does the future look like? Where are we going? If we are going to be different in 12 months, how? Show us, paint it for us, outline it. Let's see if we can see ourselves in that future, and let's be specific. Number five, sharing the plan. How you're going to get there. Incorporate some systems thinking, some strategy and system readiness into your plan, and answering questions to increase their knowledge of the actual plan itself. So allowing team members a chance to explore the plan and examine it and ask you some questions about it. Number six, building and growing your team. Recruit champions, build a coalition, enable team building and development, invest in trust building and constructive conflict, ensure clear boundaries and encourage commitment to the principle of acceptance. So invest in team um, is really the name of the game here, but also growing your people, development, leadership. John Maxwell is an author who speaks about people development, leadership, succession planning, so that if you don't show up tomorrow, there'll be some strong people who show up and take on the work. Number seven, empower each team member. Provide team members with a part to play, allow some autonomy. As leaders, navigate their threats and rewards, and journey through the change individually with each of your team members. Develop them and their skills and abilities, and they will be more motivated. Daniel Pink spoke about this in his book, Drive. Others authors have spoken about it as well. Have a momentum and reinforcement plan. So offer genuine positive reinforcement to team members, celebrate wins and achieve milestones, continue to adapt, sustain your acceleration, and ground your changes in culture. So this is about maintaining some momentum, maintaining some grit when things get hard, celebrating your team members when they are achieving things. That was in record time, that last bit. So this is just a diagram that puts all of those themes into one place. At the top, leading yourself, lead your people, manage your processes, and the blue squares in the middle sort of just being a really quick overview of the last four slides and those 8 different steps about change leadership. So next steps, these are just some tips about, if you are leaving today, what can you do if you wanted to work on specific things? If you want to learn about you, your values, your personality, leadership style, there are some sources in the source list on our website. There are self-assessments you can take, do a 360, get a coach, talk to a friend you trust about you and how your approach is. You can make some communication improvements to your experience, how people experience you, but your verbal communication, your written communication, people development, leadership, invest in your team, be purposeful in recruitment. Organizational readiness is the next point. This is something that you could talk to your leadership team about. I could talk to my boss and ask, are we ready for this? Can we make a culture change at this time? Are we ready to commit some resources to this? Can I remove some buckets of work to allow some resources for this? And finally, if you want to take a next step away, you could simply choose a model from today. Read more about it. If one of them jumped out at you, get into it and see what it's all about. Okay, that's it for my presentation this morning. I'm sorry that the last 25% was fast, but I guess we'll open it up and maybe I'll give it back to you, Colin, for some questions from our participants, so we can have a few minutes to talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. Great job also. I really enjoyed your presentation. We've got a few questions here. We don't have a ton of time, but we can take a few. So if you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. I think we touched on this a little bit, Dave, but kind of the first question we got from Richard here is if you could just kind of go over quickly, what's the difference or what's the evidence for the different change theories? So which one is better for what ends under what circumstances? When do you know which one to use, I guess? Is it just a preference type thing?
Yeah, from what I read, Richard, you know, the when people were talking about the pros and cons of the different theories, it seemed that they were saying, you know, as a leader, if you're doing this, then you might want to use one of these models or one of these theories. If there's a lot of drama on your team, you've got a lot of conflict, then this model, you know, might be the one for you. If you're embarking on a transitional change, system transformation change, you know, with 10,000 people in your organization, this model, you know, might not have everything that you need. You may want to choose a more advanced model, such as Anderson and Ackerman's roadmap. So that's what authors were speaking to. That's what I got from the reading that I've done.
Perfect. We got another question here from Greg. Um, he's just wondering if you have thoughts on what model would be the best starting point for an SHA organizational change, you know, when you're dealing with over 40,000 employees.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for the question. The best model for an organizational change with 40,000 employees. You know, my personal thought is that a combination of the models would be a strong approach for a major transformational change. I think that um, there are things that all of these authors talk about that are unique and are, you know, specific contributions to how you can go about different parts of change. You know, leading people, the processes, some very specific to meetings, some very specific to culture. And my personal views are that large transformational change requires it all. And that if there are lots of champions, lots of change leaders involved in transformational change, ideally there'd be departments focused on culture, departments focused on tools, departments focused on new learning. Uh, so if I was going about it as a leader, I would try to get the strengths from every model to make a proper plan.
Perfect. Um, Rosalie asked, how have you addressed situations where timelines for the change set out by management don't properly allow for assessment and prep needed to be done? So I guess they're just too compressed of a timeline and you can't do all the steps required.
Yeah, good question. You know, I think because I prefer to be open with leadership teams, what I have done is I've talked to leadership to say, you know, I don't know if these are reasonable timelines. Ideally, we would all have that relationship with our leadership team where we'd be able to identify problems with the plan. And I think, you know, risk management and mitigating risk is something that we are all put in some responsibility for. So I feel like our bosses also rely on us to let them know if there are gaps or issues. So openness with your leadership team, I think, is important. Also, there are some authors who speak about change in speed time. John Kotter wrote a book during the pandemic called Change, and he focused on that, on change, leading change at lightning speed. And he was bringing some examples from you know, talking about the pandemic, the crisis, where we are asked to change something in 8 hours, you know, sort of how we can go about doing that. So I would suggest some further reading as well.
Okay, absolutely. You can always learn more, right? Um, and then Lisa asked, have you found any models that are specific to agile change management? I guess the agile approach.
Hmm. That's not something I'm familiar with. So I'd be curious to learn more about that. So I would invite you to send an email to us or me, and to let me know more about that.
Great. I think it looks like that's all the questions that we have for you today, Dave. Thank you so much. Um, oh, okay, we got one more came in. Mark just snuck it in quickly here. Um, so this question has to do with vision, specifically with John Cotter's model. So they work with primary care clinics that already have a vision in place in terms of the delivery of care. So how would you navigate developing a vision for change management versus vision that has already been established?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. So it sounds like a vision is in place, and you're a change leader and wanting to establish a vision as well. Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that if it was me, I would probably want to develop a different sort of vision. So there are different kinds of vision, I guess. There are some strategic operational visions, meaning this is our service provision in 18 months from now. But there are some other visions, around client-focused care, patient and family-centered care. So you may be able to attach a vision to something else that draws the team members in, something that they can attach themselves to, and leave the vision that is pre-existing if it's mandated and required, sort of existing in place, and having a few different visions.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I think that's all the time we have today for questions. If you still have questions, we're always open to chat. I know Dave is always open to chat or grab a coffee, but you can email him at dbroda at hqc.sk.ca if you have some more questions. And then just a note, we've upped our game with the QI Power Hour, and we have these highly coveted speaker gifts, which Dave will receive today, his choice of color and everything. I love QI socks. If you'd like some socks, or if you would just like to be featured in a QI Power Hour, if you think you have something worthwhile to share, please feel free to reach out to us. You can visit our website and and ask to be a guest speaker. And we've also shared a link in the chat right here as well. So if you have a topic that you think the community of learners would be interested in, we'd love to hear from you. So be sure to visit that link. We're also going to be sending out a post-webinar survey. So please fill that out, and that just helps us improve and get better and get you the content that you want to get. So stay tuned, sign up for that for our notification and find out what we've got coming up for January in the new year here. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much, Dave, and thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, everyone.